Hello friends! Not me dropping a video on a Saturday. I know, I usually post on Fridays, but I posted to my Instagram with some more details as to what's going on with me personally. So if you want to check out that post in the updates section on my Instagram, you can. Otherwise, the reason we're here chatting on a Saturday, if you're watching this when the episode is being posted, it's because I don't want to fall behind even more than I already am. So here we are. As you can tell, we are going to be talking about a movie that's pretty political. There's no way around that fact. There is a lot of left-wing, right-wing, liberal, conservative conversation, and I don't really want to get into that, to be honest. I know I'm opening this episode really strong, I know, but I want to focus more on the story and the characters rather than the political and literal civil war backdrop. That's really how I interpreted the film when I watched it in theaters. It's not about the politics, it's not about the war so much as it's about the characters and the seemingly neutral role that they play. If you're cool with that, then let's get this intro out of the way. Hey there movie lovers, welcome back. It's your movie buddy here, ready to talk about the latest movie I watched. Whether you're a longtime subscriber, follower, or a new face, I'm thrilled to have you here. If you're looking for all the story details and what exactly happened in this movie, you're not going to find it here. What you can expect are my spoiler-free thoughts and opinions about the latest film I watched in theaters or maybe one I streamed at home. You can catch weekly releases dropping every Friday. Have a movie in mind that you want me to talk about? Hop into my DMs on Instagram, drop a comment on YouTube, or let me know on the podcast. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, follow on Spotify, and follow along on Instagram so you don't miss out on what I'm up to and what's coming up next. As always, any TikToks or articles I've mentioned in today's episode will be in this episode's description. With that all out of the way, grab your popcorn, hit that subscribe button, hit that follow button, and let's get into today's episode on Civil War. In a dystopian future America, a team of military-embedded journalists races against time to reach Washington, D.C. before rebel factions descend upon the White House. Civil War tackles a lot and some elements are pretty complex, but I just want to talk about how I kind of felt watching the movie. I do want to emphasize that I am talking about how I felt because when I was looking online for other people's takes on the film, there were a lot of differing opinions on the movie's effectiveness in conveying its message. That said, one aspect that really stuck out to me was its take on the morality of war journalism. It's interesting, but even more so is the uncomfortable idea, the reality of being detached and to the point I think the movie was trying to make, neutral. Neutrality here is interesting in regard to journalism because they're trying to report the raw truth without taking sides. But as someone who connects with characters, I felt kinda alienated because they feel so detached from the conflict, the breakdown of society, and each other. Let's touch briefly on character development. I think it's handled brilliantly. Even if the outcomes weren't what I expected or what I wanted to see, I can still appreciate the depth of what the movie achieved. Lee and Jesse, portrayed by Kirsten Dunst and Kaylee Spaney respectively, both had outstanding character development. I love how clear their arcs are and how incredibly organic they feel, even though, again, it's uncomfortable to witness that neutrality, that disconnect, and internal conflict. Visually, Civil War has its moments. I particularly loved a shot during a scene featuring Jesse Plemons. I'll put a picture of him on screen in the scene I'm talking about if you're just listening to the audio of the episode, and if you saw the trailer, he's the one with the red glasses. During that scene, there's a fantastic shot that is fantastic because it's shocking. If you've been here talking about movies with me, then you know I love an overhead shot. If you've seen the movie, then you probably know which shot I'm talking about. I don't want to spoil this scene if you haven't seen the movie, but not only do I love the shot technically and visually, but it's a moment where the more you look at the screen, the more you see and realize more and more context and what could have happened to these characters. The performances are truly outstanding. I'll admit, there were so many characters that I did not like and that I was frustrated with, but each actor and actress portrayed their roles so well. Let's talk about Kirsten Dunst specifically. I haven't seen her in a movie in a very long time. She's definitely still acting, I just haven't watched any of her recent work. That said, I was really impressed. I know she's a great actress, but like I said, it's been a while, and I really thought she was convincing as a seasoned war journalist. She effortlessly embodied the role, capturing the weariness of someone who's witnessed so many horrific things that come from war and conflict. Like I mentioned earlier, her arc is fantastic, and you can see the clear development through her nuanced performance, from where she starts to where she ultimately ends up by the film's conclusion. Now, I've got to say, I actually like the writing and the overall story. There are a lot of negatives that came up when I was doing my work looking into the movie while writing my script, which we will come back to the negatives shortly, but I still found myself drawn to the narrative. I like being out of the action for the most part. There is action, but we're really just following a group from one experience to the next. I love the tension and unease that's woven into the story, even in the most mundane tasks like getting gas or shopping. It's these everyday moments that add depth and authenticity to the story. Now, let's wrap up with my final thoughts on the movie. After going over some elements of the movie, the real question remains, is it worth your time? Let's get into it. I didn't like Civil War. Okay, I know I've said a lot of good things about the movie, but taking a step back, it's just not for me. I was actually gonna skip this movie, but my honey told me that he wanted to watch it, and I'm always down to watch a movie that he picks out because honestly, I am picking out like 98% of the movies that we watch. Civil War is a really good movie, but I just prefer the director Alex Garland's other films like Ex Machina and Annihilation, for example, but those movies are also just my preferred genres. So I mentioned the negatives a second ago, and I kind of touched on how I feel about some of the criticism, but a lot of people didn't like the lack of exposition in regard to why the war started. We also don't get any explanation as to why Texas and California joined forces, no explanation for any of the 4 factions. There's also confusion as to which characters are allied with which faction. Like I mentioned at the top of the video, I didn't take these details as the point of the movie. Would the information have been great to have? Of course, but I think not having the information is impactful and disorienting because we're basically just dropped into a war. I wasn't stressing who was right and who was wrong or why and how. I just wanted our group to get through to the end of the movie. However, I definitely understand where people are coming from that have these critiques of the movie. Another critique revolves around the characters and how the war narrative is kind of lost or muddled in the idea of getting the perfect shot. I think Civil War is really character driven with the pursuit of getting the perfect shot and the moral dilemma it entails in order to achieve this high is what really propels so much of the story. Again, the conflict is just a backdrop. Ultimately, I think if you're more interested in the war, how it started, and the factions, Civil War isn't going to answer those questions, and it's probably going to leave you disappointed. I mentioned earlier that I like that the story isn't in the action. Again, there is action, but we're not in it. This isn't your average action-packed war flick. Instead, it delves into the characters and their perspective, which is very much on the side and following that action closely. Additionally, if you're someone who values closure and resolution, what happens after it's all said and done? What are the consequences or the outcome? How are the characters affected by loss or accomplishment? If you need those answers, you might find the film's conclusion abrupt despite so many intense moments. Have you had the chance to watch Civil War yet? If you haven't watched it yet, what's holding you back? Not your cup of tea, not your genre? I'm curious to hear your thoughts after today's episode. And if you've already watched it, I want to know your take. What did you think about it? Share your thoughts, opinions, and reactions. I am all ears. To wrap this up, Civil War is a fantastic movie that you should see if you're interested, but it's just not for me. And you know, when the credits started rolling, it actually reminded me of 2014's Nightcrawler. Now, it's been a while since I watched that one, but I distinctly remember the unease I felt watching it. It's that spectacle and detachment, the desensitization surrounding the pursuit of the perfect shot. There's a disturbing disconnect where characters seem devoid of genuine emotional responses despite shocking and horrific events. This disconnect between viewer and character is brilliant, and it creates a compelling but uncomfortable dynamic. There is so much tension and dread throughout the movie. A lot of it comes from that emotional disparity, but also the music, the audio, specifically the gunshots, and the situations the characters find themselves in, especially Kaylee Spaney's Jesse. who looks like a whole child. I think in the movie she says she's in her early 20s, if I'm remembering that right, but she looks like a teenager. So that adds a whole other level of concern and frustration. This is definitely a movie, much like the director's previous films, that will stick with you long after the credits roll. All right, movie fans, that wraps up another episode. If you're enjoying this episode on the podcast, a huge thank you for tuning in. For our YouTube viewers, you'll find a link to the podcast in the description below. And don't forget to give the video a thumbs up if you like it. As always, thanks a million for joining me today, friends. Your support means the world to me. And remember, the movie talk doesn't stop. So tune in every Friday for fresh episodes. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube, follow on Spotify for on-the-go listening, and join the fun over on Instagram for behind-the-scenes sneak peeks. If you caught the last episode, then you know I was watching re-releases at the theater, but I was open to the idea of exchanging my tickets, so that's what my honey and I did. Instead of watching Star Wars Episode 1, I watched Episode 3 at home, and we went to the theater to watch The Fall Guy instead. I did have tickets for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, but I refunded them because I wanted to watch all the movies first, and I actually only had time to watch the original 1968 movie. I know I don't need to do all of that, but I've never seen the originals, and the first one was actually good. It was better than I was expecting it to be, so I'm definitely looking forward to watching the rest of them. Once I do, I'll probably end up getting tickets for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes again. The next movie I do have tickets for is The Strangers Chapter 1. This movie was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and I am really looking forward to finally seeing this one. Moving on to the updates, and this section is probably going to sound a little familiar. Life is rough, but we just got to take it one day at a time. That said, I skipped posting for a while. It wasn't planned, but it was needed. I posted a poll to the community tab for you guys to let me know what I should talk about first, and Immaculate had 75% of the votes, followed by Monkey Man at 21% and Godzilla x Kong at 4%. I posted my thoughts on Immaculate last week. Next week will be my thoughts on Monkey Man and Abigail, then Godzilla x Kong and The Fall Guy. That's the loose plan anyway. I'm trying to get caught up as we go into June. By then, we should be able to get to the podcast exclusive episodes. I have a lot of movies that I want to watch. Stop Motion, Baghead, Rebel Moon Part 2, The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, Disney's Wish, Infested. You guys, I'm really excited about the exclusives. So once I catch up and get some room to breathe, get some of that work-life balance, then I'll start watching those movies. But for now, a huge thank you to everyone who has stuck around with me to the end of the video. Last week, I shared my thoughts on Immaculate. If you haven't checked that episode out yet and you'd like to, please be sure to catch that one on the podcast. And if you're on YouTube, you can click the top right corner of the video. Your feedback is always appreciated, so don't hesitate to let me know your thoughts. As always, I'm looking forward to you all joining me on YouTube, Instagram, and of course, the podcast. Don't forget to tune in on the podcast, online, or on Spotify for exclusive episodes. Your presence and support truly makes a difference, and it means so much to me. I value your feedback. It enriches our little community and makes it a fun place to be. Share your thoughts in the YouTube comment section or hop over to Spotify for our Q&A and polls. Whether you're following on YouTube, Spotify, or Instagram at A.Rocket.Review, I'm eager to hear your thoughts. Until next time, spread positivity, be safe, take care of yourself, and happy movie watching. I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.